Hi Bobcats, it's Jamie from the Career and Counseling Center. I wanted to talk to you guys today about resumes and cover letters. It's going to be a brief workshop. Of course, if you want more information or want to talk about things further, you're welcome to come into the Counseling Center upstairs in CATS 204, and I'd be happy to talk to you about them and review them even more. One of the things that we need to talk about is the purpose of a resume. It's a quick overview of your skills and abilities in a concise format that is easy for your potential employer to review and skim so that they can see who their best candidates are for the position. Employers are reviewing resumes for even less time now, and it's important that the information is clear and concise so that they can review that matter of material very quickly, as they sometimes have hundreds of candidates looking for positions. So that's the main reason of why you need a resume, and also pretty much every single employer requires it now throughout the application process. Of course, there are those that maybe don't, but more often than not you will be requested of this through the application process, especially after graduation from college. So that's one of the main things. A typical format, one of the things that you need to do is to have your personal information at the top. You're going to want this, especially your name, pretty large on your document. We don't want your name to be overcome by other material. We need them to see who you are. So have your name, for me I'd have Jamie D. Eberly in large letters at the top center of my document. And then I would have my personal information a little bit smaller. It is unnecessary when you're listing out your personal information to put address and then your street address. It is also unnecessary to put phone and then your phone number. If you just put your address and you just put your phone number in your email, it's going to be evident to the employer what that information is. So please try to eliminate that from your document. That's the main information on your personal information. You have the opportunity to carry that information over to the reference page if you desire. Otherwise, it is not needed on the second page should you go to a second side of your resume. Ideally, you will stick to a one-page document. However, 2 is acceptable, 3 is completely discouraged. So work very hard to condense your information while still highlighting your skills and abilities, again, in a quick way. The next big thing we would have to talk about is your objective statement. Why are you submitting your resume? What is your goal? So oftentimes I will look at resumes for many students, education specifically for this example, and I will see new graduate seeks teaching opportunity. Well, that is about the same for, hundreds of other candidates. So what is it that's going to set you apart? So think about what is the job that you're pursuing? Why is this your goal? Describe yourself strongly and connect it to that position. So for example, one that has come across my desk that I think is really a great objective statement is passionate educator desires a position that will impact the development of young learners and foster a passion for lifelong learning. Now, if you take that statement and compare it to new graduate seeks teaching opportunity, if you were an employer, which one would jump out to you a little bit more? If you're like me, I think that you would agree that the passionate educator statement jumps off the page a little bit more at a potential employer. So make sure you're evaluating that. They can be a tricky thing to include. And the most recent information that I've read is that if your objective statement cannot be written strongly, then we need to just remove it. So if you want help with a strong objective statement, never hesitate to reach out. I'm happy to help you. Sometimes it takes us going back and forth over email or having a face-to-face to really hammer out some details, but usually we end up with pretty strong objective statements, so I'm happy to help you with that. Also, always make sure you're tailoring your cover letter to each position for which you're applying. Sometimes students will just make kind of a general cover letter, but maybe they're pursuing, higher level education rather than early ed. And then you've seen a position that you qualify for and you put your cover letter in for review, cover letter and application resume. but you forgot to update your resume or your objective statement. So you need to make sure that with each of the documents that you are tailoring it to the position so it feels more personable and less like a large random job search, and that you're specifically going for this position. So always look at your objective statement, make sure it matches with the goals and the position in which you're applying for. If we were having a session right now, I would pause and tell you to practice writing your objective statement. I still think that's a good idea, but considering this is an online tutorial on resumes and cover letters, it's not going to work that way. But please take some time practicing it, having people read it and give you some critique before you put it on your document. Next, because most of you will be graduating from college and pursuing your teaching degree, education would be the next section that I would consider you to include. Often we start with the degree, not just bachelor's degree. Write out Bachelor's of Science, Bachelor's of Art, whatever your degree is in. Write that degree out. I often suggest bold print. Italic print is okay sometimes, but you want to really use it in moderation. So highlight the degree that you've achieved or are in pursuit of, and then depending upon your format, it's wise to use the right side of your document too. Don't just have everything lined up on the left. So you could have maybe your potential graduation date off to the right, you could have the location off to the right, maybe the GPA. There's a number of things you can do, but the main contents that you want within your education section, obviously, like I said, the college, or your degree, and then the college. Sometimes people include the city and state, especially with Peru State College. Adding Peru, Nebraska isn't a terrible thing because sometimes people think you're from other locations. So make sure that they know that you are from Peru State College in Peru, Nebraska. Including any minors that maybe you have received, graduation date or anticipated graduation date. I strongly encourage you to include your GPA on your resume if it's over a 3.0. So look into that and determine what your GPA is and whether it's worth including on that. Sometimes people will occasionally add some upper division classes within this section that maybe they elected to take but didn't have to take, therefore setting themselves apart from their candidates. That is also something you can do if you desire. Again, work around with the information that you want to contain in that section, and then by sending it to me, we can review and see what's relevant and what needs to be omitted. So go ahead and list all of your educational experiences. Perhaps if you're finishing at Peru State College, that would need to be listed first on your document. Then if maybe you went to a community college or you transferred from someplace else, that could be next. And make sure that your formatting is precise from each section and that it matches for consistency, because consistency is really key when it comes to designing a resume. Sometimes employers can't pick between different candidates. Like maybe you have the same skill sets, you've had the same opportunities, you've taken advantage of learning opportunities as well, and they have to start dwindling down their pile of candidates, and so they start looking for those formatting errors or spelling problems, and they start tossing you out simply because your format may not be the same. It sounds cruel, but where it's competitive and a strong desire for a position, employers have to ultimately do what they need to do to get the best candidate in the door. So really pay attention to those details. Then we need to look at experience. That would be the next section that I would encourage you to include. Of course, if you feel like you have another section that is more relevant, that makes you more attractive to the employer, you can kind of mess around with your headings and put them in a format that you feel is most appropriate. But most typically, experience comes next. Often started with your job title, perhaps putting that in bold like your degree before, so that that's really brought in to focus for the employer. So the job title, then maybe the next line could be the employer name, including the city and state. Maybe you have some neat formatting to where you would put the employer and then, or your job title and then the employer all on the same line. Again, that's your style preference. Make sure again, however you put the dates up in the previous section, if it was clear to the right of the document, make sure that they're clear to the right again in this section. You can put your period of employment. I really strongly suggest writing out the month rather than putting 06 for June. Write out June 2008 to May 2017, whatever the situation may be. But writing it out looks better than the numerical format. So keep that in mind. We do discourage going back past 10 years of experience. However, some of you may be non-traditional learners and have a wealth of experience that exceeds 10 years. At that point, you and I would probably look critically at your document and see which positions need to be highlighted the most on your resume, which ones need to be drawn to the top, which ones could maybe be omitted. So if this applies to you, you can go ahead and include everything, and when you submit it to me, I will offer you the feedback of perhaps you could cut this, move this to the top, this is more relevant, so on and so forth. Then you need bullet points for your duties in those positions. Now, there is a difference between outlining the jobs that you had to complete, such as, like for some of you, maybe you worked in customer service, or maybe you had some janitorial duties. We don't want to put a bullet point of, for example, cleaning toilets. Most people can clean toilets. So what is it that you did that created an optimal environment for your shoppers? So instead of the bullet point of cleaning toilets, or mopping floors, or whatever it might be, you efficiently organized an environment that was attractive to consumers. Off the top of my head, that may not be the best example, but you see a difference where it can take the same thing that you were using as a simple bullet point, strengthen it a little bit, and give more of an accurate picture, because you, in that role, played a pivotal role to promoting a positive environment for the shoppers. And so how do you convey that? I always tell students, think about what is it that you do that sets you apart. What is it that you do, and what skills do you have that set you apart from the other candidates? So think critically about those bullet points, have them strongly worded. Avoid words such as helped, assisted, worked. They're overused and they are resume killers. So talk with me, talk with others about how you can modify that wording. And also, if you let's say you worked at daycare, the last 4 jobs that you've had, your duties were essentially the same. That does not mean you can go ahead and copy and paste all those duties from one job to the next job. You need to be creative. You need to show initiative in changing those bullet points, even if they are the same kind of job. You need to modify the wording to keep the employer interested in you, interested in your responsibilities, and that they don't start skimming over other areas because they see that you're just copying and pasting things. Especially when I receive the teachers' resumes, one of the main things that I see is that for student teaching, or not student teaching, but for practicums, the first bullet point is most frequently observed cooperating teacher, and they will have that on each bullet point for each place that they had a practicum. And I tell students, you're doing so much more than that. You're doing more than observing. What are you observing? What's happening? Are you observing teaching strategies and taking notes of things you want to implement in your class? Are you monitoring behavioral management techniques? What is it that you're observing? How are you taking that observation and applying it or using it, and thinking about your future role as an educator? So really make sure you're keeping that in mind when you're putting down the bullet points. Strengthen them and describe them strongly. And again, what sets you apart from all the other candidates applying for this position? Again, people can be in awe when they sit down with me and we talk about bullet points. It is worth your time to schedule 30 minutes for us to evaluate your bullet points. So please feel free to come in. I'm happy to help. and eager to do so. So that's kind of the experience section. Make sure you list things from the most recent to the past within the entire portion of your resume. That covers for every section. They want to see what you're doing now, and then they'll go back to your past experiences. The next section that you could be looking at would be your skills and honors, perhaps groups and organizations. Again, it can be in whatever way you feel, but these are common categories that students list out on their resumes. Perhaps it could be technology skills, maybe relevant scholarships, any certifications. If you have different licensing for various things, or maybe from past employment, those are all good things to include. Sometimes students will include dean's list. If you're an officer, for example, in an education group or anything that's education related, that's going to be an important thing to include as well. I haven't mentioned it yet, but please avoid listing high school information on your resume. If you are about to graduate from college, your college information is more relevant to this resume rather than the high school information. The one caveat to that is if you say through your volunteer experience you created a wonderful nonprofit, or you organized a wonderful charity situation, and you were a key stakeholder in that development or planning, of course that would be something we want to see within your document. But if it's that you played high school volleyball, or you were team captain for high school volleyball, although that was great, that's nothing that's really going to put you at the top of the game for your college resume, moving on to adulthood and the workforce. So go ahead and really think critically about whether that high school information is going to put you a step ahead in the career competition, or if it can be omitted. Groups and organizations, if you're a member of the Peru State Education Association, that's something relevant to be included. If you have any other campus involvement, those are really good things to see. An employer wants to see an involved employee. The schools want to see that their potential teachers are community driven. So evaluate what things you've been involved in. Also, if you've held any leadership roles, that might be a bullet point underneath it to identify what capacity you served in. Often the last section is references. Now, in other areas, sometimes resumes can say references available upon request. However, in talking with your education faculty, they have informed me that administrators have informed them that when you're submitting a teacher application and submitting your resume, they want to see who your references are. So you need to include them. Get their name, preferred email, phone number, and be careful about phone numbers because sometimes reference checks are happening in the summer, and if you write their office phone numbers, they may not be available. So talking with your reference about how they want to be contacted. In addition to that, when you are asking for a reference, be mindful about saying, will you be a positive reference for me? Hopefully, if you're asking that person, you have a great working relationship and that they will provide a positive reference for you. But if they agree to writing a reference for you and you would have a bad reference letter or recommendation letter in your file, that can prohibit you from getting jobs moving forward. And so hopefully if you ask a person and they think that you have some room to grow, I hope that they will be honest with you and tell you that they could not write a positive reference letter for you for these reasons. It's a difficult conversation and can be difficult to hear those things, but when that happens, it's an opportunity for growth. So when you're asking those people, please ask them for a positive reference, and please also ask them before you include them on the document. There are a number of places that have recently been calling references before they ever interview candidates, because if the reference checks are bad, they just don't want to waste the time of bringing a candidate to the place of employment or to the school and then find out that their references were bad. So if they get that call, if that reference that you've listed gets a call and they didn't even know they were listed as a reference, that doesn't look too great for you when the employer or the administrator hears, oh, you were listed, you had no idea. So avoid that awkward moment by checking with your references first. Those are the main points on the reference side. Things that you need to know about effective resume. Of course, like I mentioned, identifying which sections are the most important, what are the most relevant to getting you the position you desire. Your bullet points should not be in full sentences, and avoid periods or punctuation at the end of the bullet points. Make them brief and concise, but they are not in proper sentence structure. A good heavy paper, resume paper, is recommended when you send those in. Develop your resume, print it off, email it to yourself and see how it comes through. I would tell you that before emailing it to others, save it as a PDF so that the formatting can't change and cause you all sorts of problems when it gets to the employer. That's just a little tip that if any of you have received a document and it's all kind of jumbled up, that's because the person didn't save it as a PDF. So try to do that. I've talked about targeting your resume for each particular job. Don't include any information about your age, your gender, marital status, race, children's salary, or politics. Those are all things that are off limits, so leave that off of your document. Do not staple it and do not do it front to back. If you have a 2-page document, I would suggest that up in the upper right hand corner you would insert a header that would say, for me it would say J. Eberly resume page 2. I would strongly suggest you do that, but then also just fold them together. Don't staple, paper clip, anything like that. And do not fold them. If you're mailing them, more often than not you'll be emailing them at this time of, technology. But if you would be mailing a resume, do not fold them up. Get an envelope that is large enough for you to stick the papers in just as they are. Also, it is wise to type up labels if you are mailing them so that they arrive professionally gathered. Sorry about that. But yeah, having those organized in a nice professional fashion will set you apart upon arrival. We talked about consistency, keeping your resume unique to you. Usually people use Times New Roman, which is recommended, and it needs to be in 12 font. And color is really discouraged unless you're like a creative arts major or something like that. But sometimes people want their resume to stand out. They want some of themselves to come through on the resume. And there was a student who put their they put their name in a different colored font, and they just put their name in like a fancier font. Nothing too fancy. It was still very legible, but it was just different than the rest of the document, and it was a nice little touch for that student to convey a little bit more of their personality. After reviewing 40 of the class's resumes, that one just kind of stood apart because it was different, it was unique, and it really did speak to that person's personality. Since I had known her, I was like, oh, this all makes sense. That doesn't surprise me that she did that. So that was just a small, modest thing that the person did that just kind of stood out a little bit more. So when you're evaluating your document, see if there's anything that you want to do that you think is relevant to making your resume speak closer to who you are. Always proofread. The standard recommendation is to review your document. Have 6 different sets of eyes review your document before you ever submit it. So your faculty members, your friends, your family, co-workers, the college counseling center, get different sets of eyes to review it, because when you submit it to me, I may read it and think, I'm not quite clear on what you're saying, and it could be clear to the next person. But then right there you have 2 different people where somebody's getting it and somebody's not. And so do you want that possibility to happen, or do you want to word your document more clearly so that there's no guesswork for the person reviewing it? A lot of this information can be found on the Career Center website under resumes too. If I'm going through things too clearly or you want to look into it a little bit more in depth, please feel free to go there. One of the things that you're going to have to deal with within your cover letter probably, or be prepared to get questions about, if there's employment gaps. This may be less relevant for a new graduate who started college right after high school, but sometimes for a non-traditional student, if there were 10 years where you weren't working, they might want to know why that is. So talking to them about that in the interview, be prepared for that, or just address it head on. Maybe you decide to stay home for 10 years and raise your kids. Just put that in the cover letter if you feel like you want to note that you have children or whatever, but be prepared to talk about that break in employment. Again, the grammar problems, I cannot stress this enough. Check it, recheck it, have others proofread it. It's very important. Very important. If you're not paying attention to detail, this is pivotal. If they mention things within their job posting that they want certain things and want it in a certain way, do it the way they tell you. This wasn't in the educational field, but in the business world. An employer talked to me about how they had said in their posting that they wanted resumes and cover letters to come via email to the to the email address, and they had it all listed out. But then they were getting applicants sending their resumes and cover letters through the mail. The employer would open up the envelope, look at it, verify that it's a cover letter and resume, and he would just throw them away automatically. He wouldn't even consider them because it demonstrated to this employer that they have a difficulty time in following directions. So pay careful attention to the job posting and how you are to proceed, what information they want, and give that information. Another thing that can cause problems is setback in careers. Again, this is maybe more relevant to a non-traditional student. If you've had maybe an upper level position and then within your resume there was a lower level position, they might want to talk to you about that and understand the change in the status of the positions. So be prepared for that dialogue. Again, if you email jeberly, EBERLY, at peru.edu, again, it's all on the website, you can submit your resume for review. I will offer you feedback. I'm happy to have sessions with you in person. Sometimes I've done Skype with other students to review resumes, or it can go over email. And it is not uncommon for students to email me back and forth 6 times. People always worry about being a bother or a hassle. This is what I'm here for. So please do not hesitate to ask me questions, have me look over something. I'm happy to do it, and I want to do it. So, and it can be kind of fun when we're trying to navigate the bullet points on how to make you a stronger candidate. So it's a good time when we kind of meet face to face and start talking about those. So that concludes kind of the resume portion. Again, this is real brief. I go much more in depth when I'm meeting with students face to face in a workshop presentation. So please don't hesitate to contact me if you want to talk about things further. And there are examples online as well for resumes. Okay, so a cover letter, this is really an opportunity for you to introduce yourself to the employer, let them know why you're interested, and just talk to them about the skills that you have, and helping them see how they connect to what they have open and the benefits that will come from them considering you as an applicant. So the employer gets a quick introduction of who you are. Keep the letter employer-centered. Sometimes I will review students' cover letters who say, if you hire me, it will help me get a jump start on my career. If you hire me, I will be gaining skills. And that's great, and employers know that they're going to be offering something to you too, but employers want to know, what will you do for the school? What will you do for the organization? So they may be able to offer you some great things, but keep the focus on them. Help them connect who you are as a candidate and how you're going to slide right into their company, school, what have you, and do some really great things. Keep it personalized. Oftentimes I will see within a cover letter something about this position or your school or this community. Personalize it. I know that sometimes we're all busy, and when you're on a job search, it can be really difficult to go in and update your cover letter all the time for every position that you might be applying for, especially for a new graduate. You're applying for a lot of jobs. It's time consuming, but it is well worth your time and energy to reevaluate your cover letter for each position that you're applying for. Add the name of the school. Add the position in which you're pursuing. Talk to them more personally than just in general. It will help you stand apart from others. Proper sentence structure in cover letters. It is a formal professional document. So there are some things that you need to do. Do not ever have a cover letter that exceeds 1 page. That is too long. When one of those gets submitted to me, I send it right back and say condense to 1 page and resubmit, because employers don't want long letters. Clearly, as I was explaining in the resume portion, that it is very brief in the amount of time that they're looking at it. Cover letters, they will skim over a little bit longer, but they don't want to read pages upon pages. So a formal cover letter is 1 page. And I would strongly encourage you to write only to one person. You know, here at Peru State, there are search committees, but there's usually a chair for the search committee, and I would encourage all of you to write to one person. Sometimes people will elect to write to the Human Resources Director, and sometimes it takes some digging because all you know is you're being interviewed by blank school or blank employer. But you need to do some digging. Get on LinkedIn, get on their employment page, call the company. Don't be afraid to pick up the phone and say, hi, I'm Jamie Everly and I'm interviewing for this position, or I'm going to be applying for this position. Who should I address my letter to? It takes some time, but again, it's the personal side, it's the effort that you're taking in to find out who you should be directing your letter to. Sometimes students will come back to me and say, but I know it's a search committee. I don't want to ignore those other people, and that's fair. And so that to those students I say, well, find out who the head of the search committee is, and you can address it to dear, so like here maybe it's dear Dr. Dorman and search committee members. That would be appropriate, but there's some personalization in there and it's to one group. But do some looking to find out who it is that you should direct your information to. It is described as offensive to submit a letter of to whom it may concern. It lacks personalized attention. It's very general. It could be your 50th cover letter sent out, and really it is worth your time to find out the information. So when it comes to formatting for a cover letter, again, we have examples and I have packets. If any of you want them, you just have to let me know. But you need to start with your return address up in the top left corner, and then the date. Your name and stuff will be at the bottom of the letter, so you don't need to include your name. The one thing that you could do, if you want it to match exactly to your resume, it is okay to it is okay to carry over your personalized information from the resume over to your cover letter document, but it needs to be exactly the same, no fancy formatting changes or anything like that. That would be the only difference. Otherwise, I would say start with your return address and date up in the left-hand corner. You're going to have a line space, and then you're going to have your employer's name, or the potential employer's name, their address, their position would be below their name, and then their address. That's kind of the basic setup of the cover letter. And I know it's a little bit hard with me being online with you, but again, these resources are available in print on the Career Center webpage, so refer to those if it's not making sense to you. Usually this presentation is live, but because you're in a summer course, it is a little bit different. So hang in there with me and know where the resources are if it's kind of sounding confusing. And then you're going to have a line space, and then you're going to have your salutation. So again, that would be the Dear Dr. Dorman and Search Committee, or Dear Mr. Kevin Raymond, whatever it may be. And then you're going to have a colon instead of a comma. Excuse me, you're going to have a colon instead of a comma because this is professional documentation. Within the introductory paragraph, introduce yourself. Help them understand why you're interested in this position. Any of that basic information to kind of get them to understand why they're receiving this letter and packet of information from you. Do something that gets their attention. Sometimes people will put small quotes or sayings that they live by, and those can kind of be nice. I've also seen them go way off base and they were completely inappropriate to include in a cover letter. But that's kind of your personal preference and evaluation, and then in getting the review that we can help you make sure that it's appropriate. Then within the body of your letter, like I mentioned before, how do your skills connect with the needs of the employer? Don't go through the litany of everything that they're going to see in your resume. Don't go through all the accomplishments you've had, but take those fine skills that you've developed from your education here at Peru, the hands-on experience you've had through practicums and other things, and apply that while using their job posting description and the responsibilities, and help tie the pieces together. So if they want a person, a responsible person with high integrity that's community driven, looking at yourself, okay, this is what I am, this is how I possess those skills, and this is how I've conveyed it to others throughout the years, and help them connect. Help them see how you were dependable and responsible. Help them see how you were community driven because you're actively engaged in community involvement through the recreational department or developing committees for city rec, what have you. Really looking at your skills, helping them connect the pieces, and very nicely helping them see what great things you'll bring to their school or business. And then a closing. I often see students mention that please contact me between 8 and 5 at this phone number if you're interested in scheduling an interview. I tell students, employers and administrators, they know how to leave voicemails. They don't have to necessarily call you between 9 and 5. There's always the caution that what if 9 to 5 doesn't work for them? Maybe they're calling potential employees or potential candidates for a position in the evenings. Do you want them to cross you off the list because you're unavailable? No, like you want the job. So if they call you when you're not available, they're going to leave you a message, and then you can return them at your return their call at your convenience. But try not to be so self-limiting in you can call me between 9 and 5, because you will accept that call at 5:05. I promise you, when you're searching for a job. So really be mindful of that part of it. Thank them for their time. Let them know. Most often educators include information about their live text in that last paragraph. So make sure you wrap it up nicely, thank them for their time, express interest in scheduling an interview. Sometimes students will include that they're going to follow up in a week if they haven't heard from anyone. That's fine to do, but if you're going to include that in your cover letter, within your planner or however you keep track of